The silence of the suburbs is a lie. On a freezing Tuesday night in November, a woman vanishes from her own driveway, leaving behind nothing but a running engine and a half-eaten grocery bag. For weeks, the police chased ghosts. They interrogated lovers, neighbors, and strangers, finding only dead ends and polished alibis. The case was cold before it even began. But hidden beneath the eaves of a house 3 blocks away, a single rusted security camera, one that everyone, including the killer, thought was broken, was silently watching. It didn't just record a crime. It captured a betrayal so calculated that it would leave an entire city paralyzed with fear. Today, on Midnight Crime Vault, we peel back the layers of a disappearance where the only witness was a piece of glass and a digital chip. The setting was Oakwood Estates, the kind of neighborhood where people pay a premium for the illusion of absolute safety. Wide streets, manicured lawns, and the rhythmic hum of central heating systems. Sarah Miller was the heart of this community. A 32-year-old pediatric nurse known for her unwavering kindness, Sarah lived a life that was, by all accounts, transparent. She had no known enemies, no hidden debts, and a social circle that consisted mostly of fellow nurses and family. Her husband, David, was a high school history teacher, a man whose worst trait was perhaps being a bit too meticulous about his lawn. The date was November 14th. A thin veil of mist hung over the asphalt as Sarah pulled her SUV into the driveway at 6:42 p.m. The streetlights flickered against the damp pavement. Inside the house, David was reportedly preheating the oven for dinner. To any observer, it was a mundane tableau of American life, but as Sarah stepped out of the vehicle, the air changed. Within 60 seconds, Sarah Miller would cease to exist in the world of the living. When David Miller stepped outside at 7 p.m., he found Sarah's car door wide open. The engine was idling, a low growl in the quiet night. A carton of milk had tipped over in the passenger seat, spilling a white pool onto the leather. Sarah's phone was still nestled in the central console, vibrating with an incoming text from her sister. The groceries, a mix of organic vegetables and a fresh baguette, were scattered across the driveway, some rolling precariously close to the street. It was a scene of sudden, inexplicable interruption, a snapshot of domesticity violently torn asunder. David's initial confusion quickly spiraled into panic. He called her name, his voice echoing in the unyielding silence. He searched the backyard, the shed, even the neighbor's porch, desperately hoping she'd simply gone to chat with Mrs. Henderson. But Sarah was gone. Not a note, not a struggle. Just an empty space where a vibrant woman had been moments before. The 911 call David made at 7:15 p.m. was laced with a chilling disbelief, the kind that only comes when the fabric of your reality rips apart. The first responders arrived in a flurry of flashing lights, their presence stark against the peaceful suburban backdrop. Patrol cars lined the street, their beacons painting the houses in crimson and blue. Detectives Hayes and Miller, seasoned veterans of the city's major crimes unit, took charge. Detective Hayes, a man whose face seemed etched with every case he'd ever worked, focused on the immediate surroundings. Detective Miller, younger and more analytical, began interviewing David. David's story was simple, almost too perfect. He was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, listening to a podcast. He hadn't heard anything unusual, no screams, no car doors slamming, nothing. He seemed genuinely distraught, his eyes red-rimmed, his hands trembling as he recounted his wife's routine. The house was meticulously searched. Every cupboard, every closet, every crevice. No signs of forced entry, no struggle inside. The only disruption was the scattered groceries in the driveway, and a faint, almost imperceptible scuff mark near the driver's side door. Forensics meticulously combed the scene, bagging every loose hair, every fiber, every speck of dust. The initial report was grim. No obvious leads, no witnesses, and a chilling lack of evidence that could point to a clear abduction. The local news descended upon Oakwood Estates like vultures. Sarah Miller's face, a warm smile gracing her features, was plastered across every screen. The community rallied, organizing search parties, plastering missing posters on every lamppost and storefront. David Miller, outwardly grieving, became a central figure in the public's sympathy. He gave tearful interviews, pleading for his wife's safe return, his voice cracking with emotion. Yet, beneath the surface of public support, a subtle undercurrent of suspicion began to form. It's always the husband, isn't it? The police too couldn't entirely rule him out. His alibi was solid, but not unbreakable. He was the last person to see her. His grief, while seemingly genuine, held a certain theatrical quality to some of the more cynical officers. But without a body, without a weapon, without any direct evidence, David remained a person of interest, not a suspect. Weeks bled into months. The leads dried up. The search parties dwindled. The public's attention, fickle as it is, began to wane. Sarah Miller became another unsolved case, another ghost haunting the quiet corners of the city's crime records. The police explored every avenue. They reviewed traffic camera footage from the main roads leading in and out of Oakwood Estates, searching for any vehicle that seemed out of place around the time of Sarah's disappearance. They interviewed Sarah's colleagues at the hospital, her family members, her friends. They delved into her past, searching for any hidden secrets, any clandestine affairs, any enemies she might have inadvertently made. But Sarah's life was as wholesome as her public image suggested. There were no dark corners, no hidden skeletons. The case remained stubbornly cold, a gaping wound in the heart of the community. Detective Hayes, however, was a man consumed by the cold. He had a reputation for dogged persistence, for finding the needle in the haystack when everyone else had given up. He revisited every piece of evidence, every interview transcript, every detail, no matter how insignificant. He drove the route Sarah would have taken home a dozen times, imagining the scene, trying to find a flaw in the perfect crime. He even went back to Oakwood Estates, walking the streets at night, feeling the eerie quiet that had swallowed Sarah whole. It was during one of these late-night drives, almost 3 months after Sarah vanished, that something nudged at the back of his mind. He remembered a casual comment made by a neighbor during the initial canvass. Old Mr. Henderson, bless his heart, put up a security camera a few years back. Said he was worried about package thieves. But I think it broke after a storm last year. Hayes had dismissed it at the time. Most residential security cameras were low resolution, often pointed at driveways, and rarely functioning after a few years of neglect. But the thought persisted. What if? The next morning, Hayes and Miller paid a visit to Arthur Henderson, an 80-year-old widower whose house was 3 blocks down from the Millers. Mr. Henderson was frail, his memory a bit hazy, but he confirmed he'd installed a camera. Stopped working right after that big hurricane, I think, he mumbled, waving a dismissive hand towards the corner of his porch where a small, weather-beaten camera housing was still mounted. Hayes's gut instinct, a feeling he'd learned to trust over decades of police work, screamed otherwise. He convinced a reluctant Mr. Henderson to let them take a look. The camera was indeed old, its casing cracked, its lens smudged with grime. But when the technicians carefully removed it and took it back to the precinct, a glimmer of hope ignited. The internal components, though aged, appeared to be largely intact. With a team of digital forensics specialists working tirelessly, a miracle began to unfold. After 24 grueling hours, the forensics team managed to extract data from the camera's internal memory card. The footage was grainy, flickering, and riddled with static, but it was there. Days of mundane recordings, squirrels chasing each other, cars driving by, the occasional dog walker. Then they reached November 14th. The timestamp was imprecise, a consequence of the camera's degraded state, but it showed a continuous loop of the street. At approximately 6:40 p.m., a familiar SUV drove into frame, slowly making its way towards the Miller residence. It was Sarah's car. The camera, positioned at a wide angle, captured a segment of the street Sarah would have had to pass to get to her home. Then at what appeared to be 6:45 p.m., a figure emerged from the shadows, not from a parked car but from behind a large oak tree on the opposite side of the street, just beyond the edge of the camera's field of view. The figure was cloaked in dark clothing, their face obscured by a hood. They moved with a stealthy, almost predatory grace. The camera's low resolution made identification impossible, but the intent was clear. This person was waiting. The figure waited for a few agonizing minutes, a silent sentinel in the encroaching darkness. Then Sarah's SUV came into view again, turning into her driveway. The figure moved. Not directly towards Sarah's house, but in an arc, using the natural cover of the neighborhood's hedges and other parked cars. This was not a random act of violence. This was planned. As Sarah stepped out of her car, the figure was already closing in, moving swiftly, almost jogging. The camera's limited view didn't capture the actual abduction, only the approach and the immediate aftermath. What it did show, however, was a crucial, devastating detail. Moments after Sarah would have disappeared from her driveway, a car, a dark sedan, pulled away from the curb 2 houses down from Sarah's, not from her actual driveway. This car had been parked there for at least an hour prior, visible only as a dark shape in the camera's periphery, dismissed as just another parked vehicle in a crowded street. But now it was clear. This was the getaway vehicle. And as it sped away, the grainy footage captured a brief, terrifying glimpse of the driver. The image was blurry, distorted by motion and the camera's poor quality. But something about the silhouette, the way the driver's head was tilted, the distinctive shape of their ear, triggered something in Detective Hayes's memory. It was unsettlingly familiar. He instructed the forensics team to enhance that specific frame, to use every piece of software at their disposal to bring out any identifiable features. The process was painstakingly slow, a digital battle against noise and pixelation, and then it happened. A clearer image emerged, not perfect, not crystal clear, but enough. The profile was unmistakable. The slightly receding hairline, the sharp line of the jaw, the distinctive mole just beneath the right ear. It was David Miller, Sarah's husband. The revelation hit the precinct like a thunderbolt. The grieving husband, the pillar of the community, was the invisible predator. The seamless, heartbroken facade he had maintained for months shattered into a million pieces. The case was no longer cold. It was ablaze with a chilling new truth. Detective Hayes immediately secured a warrant for David Miller's arrest. The interrogation room was a stark contrast to the comfortable suburban home David had shared with Sarah. He maintained his innocence at first, clinging to his elaborate alibi, his voice steady, his eyes still conveying a manufactured grief. But when Detective Miller calmly placed the grainy, yet undeniable, still image from Mr. Henderson's camera on the table, David's composure began to crack. He stared at the image, his face draining of color, the mask finally slipping. The subsequent interrogation, a grueling 20-hour ordeal, slowly unraveled the dark tapestry of David Miller's crime. He eventually confessed, his confession a chilling narrative of meticulous planning and cold-blooded betrayal. Sarah had discovered his affair with a younger colleague, a secret he had desperately tried to keep hidden. The confrontation had been quiet but devastating. Sarah had threatened to leave him, to expose him, to take everything. David, obsessed with maintaining his perfect suburban life, with preserving his reputation, saw only one way out. He had planned it for weeks, studying Sarah's routine, meticulously timing his actions. He knew about Mr. Henderson's camera but believed it was broken, a convenient blind spot. He had parked a rented car, under a false name, 2 blocks away earlier that day, knowing it would be out of the immediate sightline of most neighbors. He had waited, hidden behind the oak tree, a shadow patiently observing the rhythm of his own wife's life, waiting for the precise moment to strike. He admitted to ambushing her as she stepped out of the car, incapacitating her swiftly, and then driving her to a remote, pre-dug grave in a secluded state park hours away. Her body was recovered days later, exactly where he had described, a tragic testament to the camera's silent vigil. The trial of David Miller was a sensation. The security camera footage, though grainy, became the star witness. It showed not just the act, but the cold calculation, the chilling premeditation of a man who had outwardly mourned his victim while secretly orchestrating her demise. The community was left reeling, their sense of security shattered. How could someone so seemingly normal, so outwardly respectable, harbor such darkness? David Miller was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. He remains in prison, a silent testament to the insidious nature of hidden betrayals. The case of Sarah Miller is a stark reminder that even in the most seemingly idyllic settings, darkness can lurk just beneath the surface. It's a story of meticulous planning, a devastating betrayal, and the silent, unblinking eye of technology that ultimately brought a killer to justice. One broken camera, one almost forgotten lens, changed the entire investigation, transforming a cold case into a chilling lesson in truth and consequence. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other truths are lurking, silently captured, waiting for someone to just look a little closer? What secrets might be hidden in plain sight, recorded by an invisible witness? Join the Midnight Crime Vault community. Subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We delve into the shadows so you don't have to.